Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the the third episode of Piano Star Masterclass, professional piano lessons for everybody, brought to you by Piano League. I'm your host, Brian Lin, a professional pianist and a piano teacher. Ever since I graduated from Juilliard a few years ago, making piano education accessible to everybody has been one of my main goals. And that's why I created the series, the Piano Star Masterclass. It starts with a 30-minute interview with a professional pianist, followed by an hour of live-streamed piano lessons taught by that pianist. During the live stream, you can ask us any questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. But remember, you can also sign up to be a performing student, regardless of your level. We have 2 more free classes in April, and it stops being free after that. So please apply soon. Piano Star is all about giving piano students performing opportunities. So besides the masterclass, we also have the Piano Star Showcase, an hour-long virtual concert for young pianists aged 7 to 12. Application deadline is in exactly 1 week, and you only have to play one piece. So if your kids or students are within that age range and you want to give them a chance to perform, be sure to check that out as well. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our guest teacher today. She is the only pianist currently performing Liszt's 24 etudes as a single program, and one of few to have a concerto list of over 60. She's a pianistic powerhouse. A result of her uncompromising dedication to the arts, she's recognized not only for her achievement as a pianist, but also for her work as a transcriber, composer, visual artist, poet, and entrepreneur. She is the founder and artistic director of the Chamber Music Festival with Special Programming Festival Baltimore, and the president of the nonprofit organization Music for Minds, which is focused on bringing classical music to the classrooms in schools and making it available for and appreciated by children. So, everybody, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Asia Kurapanova. Hi, good morning, Asia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, my pleasure.
Thank you. All right. So before we go into our topic today, I just wanted to ask you about something, okay? So for those of our audience who don't know, you are actually the mastermind behind that viral video of a pianist playing with just the knuckles, the coronavirus, the so-called coronavirus video. I'm going to play it for our audience right now so that people know what I'm talking about. This received tens of thousands of views on social media. So let's just take a look. All right, so let's see. So yeah, due to time constraint, I can only show that much. For those of you who wants to see the whole video, you can go to Asia's page or Piano League's page. We both have that video. All right, so Asia, what gave you the idea of creating that video?
Well, I was reading something, and the article was suggesting a proper caution when touching things outside. And other than just wearing masks and putting gloves on and other things, the suggestion was try to not touch anything with your fingers. Try to use elbows and fists to open doors, to like pull things towards you and stuff like that. And so somehow after reading that, I'm just like, how does that apply to pianists? Why?
That's really funny. And how did you play it so accurately too, without fingers? That's amazing.
I may have practiced.
Wow.
Right. And what I had to think about, like revealing a little bit behind that thinking. I had to think about a piece that has a lot of black notes and minimum of white notes that would allow me to be accurate, because if I would be playing C major prelude, I would not be so successful in playing with just my knuckles. So I thought about different pieces, and this came to my mind. And then I had to just navigate my hands, understanding what I'm trying to achieve, and how should I turn my wrist, and how should I turn it in not only this direction but this direction to allow me to do slurring and other articulation that is required for that piece. And I think it is a very fun start for our topic today, because it has exact relation to speaking of fingers, even though I didn't use any fingers, because in my teaching and teaching students of very different levels, people who are playing very advanced repertoire and people who are playing a very simple repertoire, a lot of times I see people struggle with following the suggested fingerings that are provided on the page. And sometimes we are reading something and we understanding that a person who wrote fingering for us maybe was successful with them himself or herself, but it for some reason is uncomfortable for us. And a lot of people say, "Oh, what was that idiot who wrote fingers for this piece? This doesn't make any sense." But it actually, there's no reason to insult the poor person who did the fingering, just because we're all differently shaped. Our hands are differently built, and we need to be creative not only with our interpretation as we plan how we're going to play the piece, but we also have to be creative, understanding exactly the shapes of our hands and understanding what makes us more comfortable, what makes us less comfortable, and kind of taking things from there.
Understood. So I guess that's kind of why you wanted to talk about today's topic, right? Did you have some personal frustrations with fingerings in the past that made you really want to share this topic with the audience, or what would you say is the reason for today's topic?
The reason is collective, because yes, I had frustration situations growing up myself. Now, you have to understand, I am coming from Russia, and Russian piano school is very famous, it's very rigorous, it's very intense, and there are so many benefits about that. But there are also a part of our tradition is sticking to the tradition, which means a lot of teachers would actually require their students to follow the fingering on the page. And it's almost like this type of philosophy where you need to make it work no matter what, even if you're not really comfortable with that. If you're going to play the piece, you need to be able to play with any fingers that you're told to, which has certain benefits to it, because you really learn to become flexible and trying to do, whatever. But at the same time, for the learning process and for the development process, it makes perfect sense. But when we are preparing for a public performance, when we're preparing for competition, when we're preparing for something that not only poses the problems of the piece in front of us, but also problems related to high adrenaline, nervousness, stress, certain fears that different people have of different levels, you need to eliminate the discomfort from every possible way to deal with stress and other things that inevitably, to a certain extent, we have playing on big stages or for important auditions or things like that. So when we are getting ready to perform, it's much better to find a fingering that is 100% stable, and that you don't have to think in terms like, okay, this is a very uncomfortable passage and I am required to play with very uncomfortable fingering, and oh my God, what if it doesn't work? you know. And size of hands makes a lot of difference. The width of this part makes a lot of difference because some people have very narrow.
I have very small hands.
Very small, but your hands are very organically shaped. See, you have maybe they're not big, but all of your fingers are pretty much the same length. They're very close. For example, the difference between my pinky and my fourth finger is much bigger of a difference than between your pinky and your fourth finger, which is good for octaves and good for big technique a lot. So some people have very long fingers but narrow wrist. That makes them less stable. But at the same time, it makes them more comfortable in octaves, in chords. But then when they play like fine passage work, they're getting like tangled up in their own fingers because it's so big. And at the same time, people with much smaller hands can be absolutely unbeatable in like double notes and small passage work, but struggle with octave technique and something that is big and requires stretch, because also stretching is tricky because sometimes it also makes you tense and you need to learn how to be relaxed while being stretched to your absolute limit, right? So I would say that identifying your strengths and weaknesses and being very open with yourself about that, like this is my strength and this is my weakness, I have to watch out for that, I have to watch out for that. For me, for example, uh, I have wide wrist and it's very helpful. I don't have long fingers, but they are kind of thick and so they feel stable. My problem is my pinky is really short. So when I play octave passages, it is comfortable for me to use my fourth and third fingers for octaves because I have enough stretch for that. But when I'm playing wide keys with my pinkies, I have to be very careful because if I'm not careful, I start touching other keys with my fourth and third fingers because my pinky is so short. I'm really like easy keyboard. So we all have these little things that betray us at times, and we have just to be conscious about it and try to pick fingering that would aid that. And for example, I'm trying to use more of the fourth finger and more of the third finger whenever possible, and sometimes even support my pinky with my forefinger when possible, playing octave passages in it, that helps. And I would alternate much more these three fingers rather than trying to play with the same pinky all the way along. So for my type of hand, alternating works perfectly. For some people, they're not finding that very comfortable, but at the same time, I mean, especially the third. Some people cannot stretch the third to the octave. It's just depending on the shape and your individual flexibility. It's different things. But for the octave passage, this is my little.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, from what I understand, you have some examples that you would like to share with us, so that we can go a little bit more in depth in those, the double notes that you were talking about, the octaves. Would you like to share some examples from pieces, maybe where changing or using the correct way to finger to use the correct fingerings might help someone play better?
Yes, like for example, one second.
No problem.
For the octave passage, I have this example
Sure.
of Chopin etude.
Okay.
And finder. Okay, this is the example. Can you see it?
Yes, you need to. No, you need to. You're sharing your Finder. You need to share the picture instead. So
Do you see it now?
no. So why don't you stop share and then yes, and then open. That's okay. Open the picture and then
Ooh.
share. Yeah, there we go. Now it's clear. Yes.
So there is this wonderful passage in the Showtime
Okay.
Etude, uh, where once we have something going chromatically, such as here, it's more idiomatic, and people would alternate, and probably fourth fingers on the black notes and fifth fingers on the white notes.
Right. Right.
But when we come to this passage, everybody is different. For some people, it is easy to just blast it with all fifths. But blasting it with all fifths poses an additional stress on the fifth finger and the wrist itself. So it's very exhausting, and you're pretty much dying by the time you're getting up. At the same time, what is the octave passage? A lot of people, it's not necessarily 100% about the fingering itself, but fingering is not something that comes first. The first should come your idea of what you need to get, of what you want to get. And it's like you're trying to paint a picture and you're picking your brushes. Am I picking a fine brush, or am I picking a thick brush, or whether it's a intense color or pale color? So you need to understand what's the easiest way for you to group these notes. What makes you more comfortable to go da 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 da, or da da dum da da dum da da dum da da dum, depending on your individual shape. For some people, it would be easier to play one note in a stroke. I mean, three notes in a stroke that goes upwards. Da 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 da. For some people, it would be circular motion. Da da dum da da dum is more comfortable, and depending on that, you can decide whether you would put, for example, more stable finger for you.
Gotcha. So it's deciding which of the group is the first note, right?
Yeah. You're like, here you can definitely play 4-5-5 as that first note. If this is the first note of the group, it would be your mental accent, not real accent, but your mental accent. After that, you slide to gain 5 and the 5, or you go, if your finger is stronger, your stronger finger is 4 for the octave, you can go 4-5-5. But some people would even go 2 fours in a row, and some people who can stretch enough would do 3-4-5. No, that's only for people who have big hands.
Right. So
But
how would you suggest someone to decide which group they're more comfortable with? Should they just try them out, and how do they try it out?
you break the passage in the small groups,
Okay.
and you try each group separately. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Then you shift one note off, and you go na-na-na, da-da-dum, da-da,
Gotcha.
da-da-dum. And then you need to identify, gradually try to play it a little faster, each little group, and see in what combination you feel you're more comfortable and you're getting more clarity. And in a lot of passages that are not octave passages, in the double notes and in the passages that are just one line passage, grouping notes together and seeing what grouping works for you better is very, very beneficial because it also addresses the way you pick your fingers as well.
Gotcha. So one more question on the octave before we go on to the double notes. How do we deal with the thumb when we're doing the octaves? Because I know a lot of people, struggle with just playing. Do you put more emphasis or weight on the pinky or more on the thumb? What do you think about when you are grouping these notes?
Well, I have sort of two layers of processing. One is melodic uh, grouping, which is more based on what's happening on the upper line. But then I always practice the lower line separately. I always practice the thumb separately.
Ah,
And so after I pick my groups, I break the octaves in two voices and I practice them separately. And emphasis is something very individual depending on where you are. Sometimes on certain black key, it's more stable to kind of put your thumbs down. And on some white keys, it's more grounding to be kind of putting emphasis on the outer lines. But I don't have such a thing where I'm constantly playing by the thumb or by the upper line. I vary it depending on whether it's at
understood.
top of the passage,
Understood.
up the bottom of the passage, or like little curve in the octave passage.
And if you can't, if for people who have small hands and you just can't reach even an octave, for example, or like you can barely reach an octave, would you recommend that they play on the side of the piano, or I struggle with this myself too, or just on top of it? What makes more sense, do you think?
Oh,
If let's say if you were playing a 10th or 11th, I don't know how far
but
you can reach.
if I'm playing the
Right.
10th,
Mm-hmm.
which is about how much I can reach.
Right. Right. So you
Then I'm down because
okay.
I will be touching the
That
key.
would be touching the keys. So you would still keep the wrist low and play on the side.
My mom was my first piano teacher. Bless her heart. She, growing up and up to today, she was always having very small hands. I'm talking a person who didn't reach an octave by the age of 14.
Wow.
So like really small hands. She was graduating from conservatory playing Brahms too. So what she did, she carefully let me pull it this
Go
way.
ahead. Yes.
It's a very tricky but very important thing to understand. Same as people who gradually and very accurately stretch to accomplish certain yoga positions or to achieve a split or do all sorts of things. Our stretching is comprised of how you're stretched here and how flexible things are here. And here we have connective tissue and tendons and joints that are also flexible in between. All these things are stretchable. So what my mom would told me after I practice and my hands are warmed up and I'm kind of in a very good way, she would tell me I was little and she was terrified that I would grow up with small hands too. So I was little and she made me do that every day very, very carefully. She would like put your pinky or fourth finger upon the end of the key, like this. Do you see?
Yes.
Would
Yes.
be able to like you just sort of pick with the end of the finger.
Uh-huh.
You just like any surface, you just do this.
Ah, okay.
Like you just you put your finger this and this to the end, and then
Uh-huh.
you take the opposite side and you very carefully pull in a very, very gentle way, trying to stretch. You will feel stretching here.
Understand. Just like how you're doing a split with your
Yeah,
hand.
yeah, very.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you do a little massage here, and you pull. It is a very you need to understand. Nothing strong, nothing aggressive. Don't
Right. Don't hurt yourself.
not trying to achieve our ideal stretching overnight or in a week. But if you do like, or also you're like sitting on the train or in the metro or something, and you like literally doing this and
Mm-hmm.
this and
Mm-hmm.
doing this and doing this, and surprisingly, it helps because
Gotcha.
if you then stretch and you kind of have a straight line here, that would allow you to play most of the octaves.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Wow. I should I will tell my students to do a little more stretching from now
Yeah,
on.
it's
Yes.
very good. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So we have about 3 minutes left. We Why don't we go over one more example and then we'll move on to the students. How about that?
I would love to
Yes.
pull, this is a very good example.
Okay.
This is from, uh, this is from a wonderful etude by Liszt called Reagan.
Okay.
And there are two runs in that etude that are very similar. And they kind of go up the keys. The same type of passage go in one key and then in another key, and then in two more keys in the following run of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is the Petter's edition. It is a very good edition
Gotcha. Right.
that we all love and cherish. And the fingering is provided by Emil von Zauber, who was a wonderful pianist, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't have any reasons to not trust what he's saying.
Right.
This particular passage, for example, he puts thumb on C sharp, followed by this turn, where you need to kind of cross your entire hand over C sharp with the thumb, and then going even farther on the
Right.
flat key, which is somewhat uh, somewhat stressful.
It's yes, it's stressful enough to just play a thumb on the black
That's
key.
why he's
And
doing that, because he wants to keep the fingering the same, because in the passage, in the similar passage in the next measure, there would be the same thing. There would be thumb on the D and then third on the B, and it just rolls this one position and that one position, and that makes sense. But here, if we're playing it very fast, which is quite, quite fast tempo of this etude. And if we want to be gentle, and the being gentle here is the most difficult thing, to not have unwanted accents and anything that, sticks out. We need to reconsider what exactly do we want to do. If we want to make that C become a part of that kind of accented left hand note, it's one thing. But if we want to kind of being able to play it in a very, very, very fine flow, we probably will have to put thumb on E instead and put the fourth finger on C sharp. In that way, it would be much smoother.
right.
And
How
that
how does one decide on which how do you decide, okay, so I put four here and the white the thumb on the E. How does one figure out I guess the
you know,
fingering of a whole
you know, these,
passage?
these very popular mathematical games where you have to figure something out depending on certain pictures provided or certain numbers provided. It's not like real math, but it's like a mathematical task, and people love it. So very, very oftentimes, in order to figure out what the answer is, you have to write out all possible versions and compare them.
Gotcha.
So what I would do, I would, if I feel this doesn't really work for me, I try to play this passage with as many options of fingers as I can possibly figure out, and I write all of them down. Some of them can be like completely idiotic and like definitely will not work, but I will still try them.
Right.
And that way there's always would be like one or two the best ones that just feel in the hand right.
Right.
Also grouping 4 notes, and then once you reach the thumb, 3 notes, and then the chromatic scale. Understanding that thinking in groups brings psychologically fingers together and help you kind of think through them faster. And we play fast when we think fast, not the opposite.
Right. So just on that example, I can see you if we put one on the E, then I can already see two versions where from the highest note, highest C sharp, you could go 5, 4, 3, 1 or 5, 3, 2, 1, right? There's already two versions there,
Yes, yes,
right? So
yes.
so I guess for pianists out there, you should try both versions out and see which one feels more comfortable.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All
And
right.
in the forward run, sorry, I will eat one more minute
Sure.
of your time, because I think it's a very valuable example.
You're sharing the Finder again, so you need to open it and then you're right. You need to share the picture instead.
Yeah. I think it is this one. Do you see it?
No.
Okay.
There we
Okay.
go. Yes.
So this is the next this is the next page. See the same passage that was in the previous one with that works normally with the thumb on the D.
Right.
And now he's trying to keep the same fingering. And this is, to me,
Oh, wow.
ridiculous. You need to put your fourth finger on C natural after thumb on E flat.
Wow. You have to really turn, from the black key to the white key.
And now think it's piano. It's really soft, and it goes. So
Right.
probably Emil von Sauer's hands were not very big, and for him, such turning in fast play, in a fast tempo, in a very delicate dynamics was fine. But if I'm trying to play this fingering that is written in this measure, I sound like an elephant that accidentally, out in a furniture store or or copper store. So
Gotcha.
I'm really like on eggshells. So I need to repurpose that. So
Right.
I'm putting here myself. I'm putting 5 on E flat, and then I'm putting 3 on C, and then I'm putting on A. I'm putting thumb, and then fourth on F sharp.
Ah.
I reach A with my thumb, and then from F sharp I'm putting second finger and going up naturally the way scale.
Chromatic scale goes.
Yeah, and it works. My type of hand, it works like gazillion times better than what's written on the page.
Right, I can already feel it. I was going through your fingering in my brain, and it does feel a lot better. So,
I know some people who played it this way and they were fine, but I look at it and I'm just, what?
gotcha. Right. So, yeah, just a mental note for everyone. Don't feel bad if you can't do the fingering that's on the score. Figure out your own fingering. What works best for you.
Fearless and try as much as you can, and it's completely fine to tailor your fingerings to your own needs.
Gotcha. All right. So I think it's time finally to get to the masterclass session of this. Yeah, that was super helpful. We'll have the video on replay so people who missed the live stream, they can watch it again. And we have our next performer in the waiting room now, so I will let her in. Her name is Anna, and let's begin. Right, Asia, you ready to
Yes.
see the first performer? All right.